Welcome to the fifth session in the 2019 Virtual Summer School Series, presented by the National Association of Extension Program and Staff Development Professionals and the Program and Staff Development Committee of the Southern Region Program Leadership Network. This webinar series is endorsed by the Joint Council of Extension Professionals. Virtual Summer School is being hosted this year by Michigan State University Extension. I'm Gwen Sheely with Michigan State University Extension, and I'm the NAEP SDP Programs Committee Co-Chair, along with Celeste Carmichael from Cornell University. We also have to thank Diane Nashburn, who is the representative for the Southern Region PLN PSD Committee, for her work in helping to organize this webinar series. So we're pleased to have you here with us today to learn from today's webinar, which is titled, Looking to the Future, Succession Planning Model. Our moderator today is Kenneth Jones, Director of Program and Staff Development from the University of Kentucky. Our panelists today include Dr. Fields from the University of Arkansas, Dr. Sapp from the University of Georgia, and Dr. Young from the University of Kentucky. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ken Jones.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for this particular topic, succession planning. And I also want to thank my other colleagues who have shared this week and provided some very insightful topics around similar relational topics from mentoring and onboarding, and all of this really ties back to the succession planning, making sure that we have individuals in place to take on the reins, if you will, when it comes to extension. And I think I speak for the majority of you when I say that we definitely care about our organization. If I were to look at the list of individuals joining, I'm pretty sure I'd see folks that are fairly new to extension, but we probably have quite a few that have been around for a while. And that goes without saying that you care about this organization and where we're headed in the future. And with succession planning, as we'll get into today, I'm hoping we can have a fruitful conversation about what that means, what it looks like, and how we can continue to provide extension with the leadership that we need to make sure that we're moving full speed ahead in the very near future. I have my panelists here. You can see those photos and their titles, and I'll go more in depth with their backgrounds here in just a second. But first, I want to share a few slides with you, and I think the first thing we're going to do is to have a poll here. Okay, all right. Well, it looks like we've got quite a few folks that say no, you don't have a succession plan in place. We've got some that say not sure, and it looks like there's one there that says definitely we've got something that's moving forward. So, well, that's the reason why we're here. And I think that says a lot for our states and our extension systems in general as to where we are. I think that conversation is not taking place enough as to where we need to go to make sure that we've got the right people on board. And we may have the right people on board, but are we grooming them to step into some of those more senior leadership roles to take us full speed ahead is the question. So I think part of it could be that we may not necessarily know what we mean when we say succession planning. And hopefully everyone can see the definition that's on the screen here. It includes the process of identifying individuals. So first we're talking about identifying those critical roles more specifically that are necessary to keep extension poised towards a fruitful trajectory, and then taking steps to put plans in place to get those individuals who have the potential, who have the desired skills, and can do those jobs. But we also need to make sure that a part of succession planning is once we have those individuals in place, it's about supporting them to provide them with the resources that they need to do their jobs effectively and to be successful. And preparing those with the potential to lead in the future is key. So as we talk about succession planning, that's the gist of what we're referring to. And I think a lot of systems, extension systems, we may have some components of that. We may have some inkling as to what we're wanting our system to look like in the future, but a true succession plan is as such that we are looking at those positions that are key and making sure that we've got the right individuals at the table. But I would remiss if I didn't share with you some myths when it comes to succession planning. The question, as you can see here on the screen, is why bother with it? You know, it's going to happen. Things will just fall into place. People come on board, they either leave, retire, and we'll find someone else. Well, we all have stories that we can relate to when it didn't work out as smoothly because we did not plan accordingly. And we may have gotten the wrong person in a role. We may have gotten someone who was not quite ready and didn't feel comfortable and had to make some adjustments there. But in all actuality, when we're doing it the right way and with being proactive about it and thinking through it, it should work effectively. But some of the myths that I often hear, and I'm pretty sure you may have some others, but these are just a few common ones that I'm familiar with, is that we already have a good internal candidate. And by that, we have an individual that is already being groomed, or we've got someone that's already in place and that person's going to stay around forever. Well, it's naive to think that, first and foremost. But it still begs the question as to whether or not they are currently the type of leader that we want. If we've got that internal person that is seen as a successor, and if they have everything that they need as far as skills and talents to move forward. We know we want someone outside because clearly someone outside of the system are more qualified. And I think that is a problem with not having succession in mind, because if we're hiring individuals who are not qualified for the job, then what are we doing? We really need to sort of take a step back and think about, when we put forth a hire, are we preparing the individual to not only do the job that they're hired to do, but what other skills do they bring to the table to more effectively create synergy among the team? Because really, when we talk about a leader, we're talking about someone who can sort of rally the troops, not having someone that can do all things for all people. But in extension, as we know, we work together and we make the connection and we support one another to make things happen. So not having someone that's qualified within poses a problem. And when we have someone that's inside, we tend to know at least what we're working with and who we're working with. But when we're looking outside, as we know, a lot of times people can look good on paper and they may be totally different during the interview process. And then sometimes they come on the job and they still look good. And then maybe 6 months later, we see some things that are different. But that's not to say that we don't look outside, but we also need to make sure that we are taking into consideration the talent that's right under our noses. And then the last one here that I have, as I mentioned, I'm pretty sure you could come up with some others, but we don't have someone that is completely ready. And I'm going to share some preliminary findings with you here shortly, but the question is also in the forefront of my mind: what do we mean by completely ready? We can all think of our jobs that we may currently be in and previous jobs, and that first day on the job. Were we completely ready to do the task at hand? So that should help us to understand that it's important to make sure that we're supporting individuals from the very beginning and throughout to make sure that they are able to focus on succession planning after they're gone, but also while they're in those roles, being able to do an effective job. So why bother? Again, just a few things here. Retirement numbers are very high among us, and I think that's going to continue. We clearly don't function in an environment now where a lot of our parents and our grandparents came on jobs and they stayed in those roles for 30, 40, 50 years. We're seeing people make some transitions, whether it's because of retirement in many cases, as the slide here identifies, but there are other reasons as well that they may be moving forward. And with retirement, not only is that individual going out the door, but a lot of that wisdom, institutional wisdom, is leaving right along with them, without any plan that was in place to make sure that someone could step into the role and they're equipped with the knowledge and wisdom that's needed. Job hoppers are abundant. We've all heard the saying that, hey, when you're looking at your career, particularly in academia, are you wanting to be a big fish in a small pond or a big fish in a big pond, or vice versa? And many people are looking for that next great opportunity. I'm certainly not saying that looking at different opportunities is a bad thing. It's going to happen. And so that's another reason why I think it's important for us to think about succession planning, because we may have some talented individuals, but they may not necessarily be with us always. And so a plan needs to be in place. Options abound also. There are so many jobs out there now that didn't exist 5, 10, 20 years ago. And people are making sure that they are, our employees, people, our coworkers are making sure that they are marketable and they're able to move not just within a system, but outside of systems and do different things. So when that happens, we definitely have to be mindful of that and plan accordingly as well. And of course, expense is another one that will definitely bite us. Recruitment and retention is a full-time job, but it's also a very expensive one. If you look at the cost of recruiting an individual, providing them with the resources that they need, retaining them if they're looking at elsewhere and you really want to keep them, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars as far as an investment is concerned. And so why do we want to have individuals on board that sort of slip through our fingers because we hadn't planned accordingly to make sure that they are able to do the job and to be there to be successful. So real quickly here before we get into the meat of this presentation, the Southern region has what's called the Program Leaders Network, and some of the other regions may have something that's similar to this, but it consists of extension directors, program and unit leaders who come together to collaborate with the aims of strengthening extension educational programming throughout the region. Each year, the committees come together to have conversations, meet, collaborate, and also to put together what we call a plan of work or an action plan to address emerging issues and needs. And I'm a part of the Program and Staff Development Committee, and in 2018, last August actually, one of the topics that came across our agenda was the importance of succession planning within the extension system or systems and what that looks like. And so we decided to conduct an assessment of succession planning, whether it's being done or not, across the Southern region. And so I was going to just share a few slides with you so that you can see some of the preliminary data that we've gathered. Here, as you can see, we had 11 of the Southern states participating. And if you are representing a Southern state on this webinar and your state doesn't have a star, feel free to get a hold of someone that can get a hold of your extension director and have them to complete that survey. It's still available. We will really appreciate that. And this is something I will say that I'm hoping to expand nationally. So as we move forward and we gather some data and make heads or tails of it in the Southern region, I'm hoping that we can expand this a little bit. But 11 states participated. We had a total of 16 extension administrators who responded to the survey. So it included 1890 and 1862 institutions across the Southern region. You can see the states that were involved there at the top. But we did come to some conclusion, just kind of looking at some of the data that was available to us, is that when it comes to succession planning, as I mentioned, understanding it varies. And we had about half that were sure that they have people in key positions to help extension remain a viable component in the college. But some noted that plans are in place, but there's no individual that is being earmarked or trained or groomed to take on those responsibilities. When referring to examples of a plan, it ranged from anything to detailed strategies to simply advertising and hiring someone with the talent and skills that we need. And so just with those examples, you know that a lot of people are set on plans, but you've got quite a few that are just kind of going with the flow because of all the other demands. Let me not minimize that are going on in their states. And succession planning is secondary to a lot of the things that are at the table. So there were a number of times when positions are filled, but that warrants the need for succession planning. Just looking at some of the numbers here, there was a question asked about internal hires over the past 2 years, and it ranged anywhere from, we've had 0 hires to 10 hires. External, 0 hires to 7. So if we're doing that hiring, certainly succession planning should be a topic of discussion. And then the last bullet there, the majority indicated that it would take at least a year or more to replace extension leadership. So I'm pretty sure there are a lot of reasons for that, but part of it could definitely be that we don't have folks that are ready to take on those responsibilities. So just something quick and dirty for you to chew on, but now we're going to really get into the meat of it all, and we have our distinguished panel here to share with us, and I will provide just a little bit more information as far as their backgrounds in no particular order here, just the list that I'm looking at here. We have Dr. Rochelle Sapp, who is a leadership development specialist at the University of Georgia's College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences. Rochelle plays a key role in coordination of the development and implementation, of the LEAD 21 leadership program. And I think many of us are familiar with LEAD 21. Some of you may have participated in that program. In addition to that, Rochelle facilitates a statewide leadership program advancing Georgia's leadership in agriculture and forestry. She received her undergraduate degree in agricultural leadership development from Texas A&M, and her master's and doctorate degrees in agricultural education and communication, specializing in leadership development from the University of Florida. Rochelle, thank you for being with us. Next, we have Dr. Jeff Young, who currently serves as the Director of County Operations for the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service. Dr. Young began his extension career as a 4-H agent. He later became District Director, supervising over 150 staff in 15 counties. These experiences fed his interest in urban extension programming, given that the majority of the urban counties in Kentucky was within his district, which led him to take a lead in organizing a statewide urban extension forum in Kentucky. He remains active in several organizations, and he also is a past national treasurer of NAEPSDP. Jeff holds a PhD in educational leadership and organizational development from the University of Louisville, a master's of public administration from the same institution, and a BS in agricultural economics from the University of Kentucky. Welcome, Jeff. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. D.Q. Fields III. He is the Dean of the University of Arkansas's Dale Bumpers College of Agricultural, Food, and Life Sciences, and has been in that role since 2017. In this role, Dr. Fields manages the budget, operations, personnel, and academic programs of the college and works closely with the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. Previously, he was professor and chair of the Department of Agricultural Economics and Rural Sociology at Auburn University. Before that, he was associate professor and coordinator of the Alabama Farm Analysis Program with the Alabama Cooperative Extension System and the Department of Agricultural Economics and Rural Sociology at Auburn. He has also worked as assistant professor and director of small farm outreach at Florida A&M University. He earned his bachelor's degree from Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, his master's degree from the University of Missouri, and his doctorate from LSU, all in agricultural economics. Dr. Fields, welcome. So, panelists, if you haven't done so already, if you can unmute your mics, and we'll get started with some of the questions here. So first, I want to ask you to please share some information in regard to your career path, so your career journey, and how has your experience shaped your philosophy on succession planning? Rochelle, you want to go first?
Oh, sure. So as you mentioned, my master's and PhD at the University of Florida and undergraduate at Texas A&M. And truthfully, I'm kind of one of those rare cases where I went straight through on all three of my degrees and then landed here at the University of Georgia to primarily run LEAD 21. And over time have been more involved in our extension system. And I think how those experiences have kind of shaped my philosophy on succession planning, I guess I kind of almost have two views. So as far as kind of external, as far as LEAD 21 perspective, it's not just about the institution or this extension system itself thinking about that, but the whole entire land grant system as a whole, or extension system across the nation. And that we have to be investing in people early and often, whether that's LEAD 21 or internal leadership development programs. And it's not just about the institutional knowledge, but also giving them some of those leadership capacities. And I think that's rang even more true as I get more immersed and involved in our extension system here. I work really closely with our administrative team, specifically with an extension, but even starting to branch out into our college, and seeing more of that, that the more we invest in those people kind of in that middle, even early career to middle range, that the more likely we're going to have people that are around to step into those roles, that they're going to be prepared. But if they leave, it's okay, because hopefully there's other people that are being trained as well. So hopefully that wasn't too long an answer.
Great.
Go ahead, Dean Fields. I'm next. Okay, well, I'll share a little bit. So my first job after completing my master's was working at Florida A&M University as director of the Small Farm Outreach Program. So that's kind of how I got my start in extension. And after completing my doctorate, went to Auburn in a role that was supposed to be the most difficult to get promoted in, which was a 75% teaching, 75% extension, 25% teaching role with no research component. So I had to learn to navigate that. So difficult role. But, after serving in that role and moving to department head, I will say that kind of helped shape, my thoughts and philosophy on the importance of succession planning, because, I was department head, from 2013, I guess, to 2018 at Auburn, and there were a lot of extension faculty that we had to hire. And it was a very difficult thing, even to hire an extension faculty member, let alone thinking about training that person, training the next generation of leaders. So Rochelle mentioned stepping back and doing training and preparing leaders kind of at that mid-level. I'm thinking we need to even be looking farther back and looking at how we recruit individuals and train individuals who have the capacity to fill an extension type role when we're looking at them as an undergraduate student even. I think that, it's our pipeline is getting more and more narrow because programs are not focusing as much on that type of an analyst, whether it's or scientist or extension specialist type person in PhD programs anymore. And I'll talk a little more about that later. So.
Okay.
Well, I agree with a lot of the points that Rochelle and Dean Fields have brought up. Having been in extension for almost 30 years, one of the things that I look back on that was very helpful to me is that when I started, and then up until about 10 years ago, we had something called a professional development plan that was part of the annual performance evaluation process. And this allowed me to discuss my career goals with my supervisors and led to some really good conversations so that they understood where I thought I wanted to go, and then were able to help provide me with experiences and some coaching and mentoring that helped really prepare me for the next step in my career, which was becoming a district director. So I think there should be that formal step in our systems, but if it's not, I think it's up to all of us, no matter what position that we're in, to take the initiative and have those conversations with whoever our supervisors are, so that they understand, whether they take the initiative or not, which they should. Ultimately it's our responsibilities to manage our own career. So either it's a formal part of the system, and if it's not, take that step on your own, schedule some time, and talk to your director, your supervisor about what you're interested in, and then also we're going to talk about later mentors and some other things. But those just some initial thoughts.
Great dive into this as we begin. One of the
Ken,
yes.
if you don't mind, since we've had an introduction of our speakers, do you mind stop sharing your PowerPoint, and then we'll have a larger view of our panelists?
Sure. How's that?
That looks great.
Okay. All right. So I shared with you some of those preliminary findings from the Southern Region evaluation. And one of the things that continued to come up when a question was asked about what are some of the qualifications or what are the characteristics? What are the criteria for the next extension leader? And a lot of times it came up that you want someone with extension experience. Makes sense to me. You know, if you're looking for someone who's going to step into a teaching role, you would probably want someone that has some teaching experience. If you're looking at a top researcher and someone's coming in at 100% research appointment, then they probably need to demonstrate that they can do that. So I get it that extension experience is important. And I think you all have sort of highlighted that, you know, as we move forward, whether it's Dr. Fields mentioned, even at the student level, you know, we're grooming those individuals. How do you see succession planning as it helps us to move forward into the future, whether that's focusing on student recruitment and getting students into extension, or grooming mid-level managers to become administrators?
Well, I'll jump in. I think, you know, you really have to be intentional at all levels if you want to have an effective succession plan. And, you know, I think when you're looking at it from the student level, you may not be doing it strictly for your institution, but you're doing it for the overall system and putting people in the pipeline. Mm-hmm. But at the individual institution, I think it's our, you know, we should all be looking to identify talent and identify how we develop that talent, and, you know, find ways to support, provide leadership opportunities, and try to groom that next generation of professionals. If we all know from our backgrounds that the extension faculty member, extension leader is a unique skill set. You know, you have to be able to deal with people, you have to be able to communicate well. And I think that someone who comes into a leadership role should really exemplify all of those things that are major qualities that we see in the individuals who are subordinates to, who would be a subordinate to that leader. So have to think about, you know, all those in trying to develop that plan.
And I'd like to kind of hit a little bit, I guess, expand on that even, of what both of you said, and this idea that they need to have extension experience. And I don't disagree with that by any means. However, I do think we also have to step back and recognize that sometimes the skills and abilities that got us to the point where we might be promoted into more of an administrative type leadership position may not always be the skills and talents that we need at that administrative level position. You might be really great at your programming if we wanted to expand, you know, teaching or research, but those may not necessarily be the skills that we need as we move into that administrative position, because now you're not going to be doing programming. You're not going to be, you know, doing those same things. You're definitely moving into more of that people management and leadership than you are program management, and that can be a different skill set. And so I think it's also about thinking about how do we give people those opportunities to try out some of those things, not just informal training, but also giving them opportunities to try out something in a safe space where they've got somebody that's going to kind of catch them if they're struggling with that, or that they have that person they can go to and say, hey, I'm working on this with this group, I'm leading this group for the first time, and I'm struggling with this, and having somebody that they're going to be able to bounce ideas off of, and to develop them in place before they actually get into a position where they're now in charge of an entire extension system, or maybe an entire district of people.
Good point.
Yep, that is a really good point, Rochelle. And you know, it's important that I think we emphasize two things, both to our students and to you know, folks at all levels of our organization, and that is we should be in the people development, you know, business in a way, whether it's our clients in our communities or it's the people that we have working for us. And we all know that sometimes that the financial compensation for working in extension or education in general is not there. However, you know, there are many more opportunities that we have to help provide development and to help people reach their goals that you know, they're not going to find in you know, in private business sectors sometimes. The other thing that I think we need to emphasize is the importance of being a lifelong learner, and now more than ever, we just have to have that mindset. You know, the time that we could you know, go into one job and stay there our entire careers is, you know, that's rare. And so we have to be prepared, and we have to prepare ourselves for these opportunities when they arrive.
Mhm. Well, I certainly agree that you have to be proactive in your own career choices and making sure that you're selecting those things that will help you to develop as an individual. And it's also important for the administrators within a college, within an extension system, to provide those opportunities for individuals so that they can grow and develop professionally. And that, Gwen, if you can pull up the next poll question, it kind of gets at that. I wanted to see how many folks have some type of leadership development program within their systems. If we can get that up. So the question is, does your extension system or your college have a leadership program for staff and or faculty that promotes succession planning?
Thanks for this question, Ken. Selfishly, I'm really interested.
Ken, we're at almost 70% of our audience that has voted, so we're going to give them just another little bit here to answer.
Okay.
Okay, I think we've gotten most of the responses. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results.
Okay, so 63% say no, 19% yes, and quite a few not sure. Okay, all right, great. Okay, so that sort of leads into my next question. And I did note that we've got some Q&A questions. They're queuing, and I looked over those quickly, and I think those kind of relate to some of the other questions that I have for the panelists. So I'm going to hold off for just a little bit, and then I'm going to make sure I incorporate those questions. So just be patient with me for just a second there. I know Sarah had submitted two of those. So Jeff, I know that you have been working in Kentucky very hard with agents and specialists to create an initiative through Epsilon Sigma Phi, which is this new program, which I'm familiar with as well. It's called ESP Leads. And it was something that was sort of generated by our staff to say, hey, we want this opportunity to develop. So can you talk a little bit about that program as one that is being geared towards maybe not specifically succession planning, but we're hoping that we're going to have some individuals that sort of rise to the top where if those positions do become available, they may be qualified to do so.
Sure, Ken. And just throw in that Ken is also very highly involved in this program as a leader. I guess it was about a year ago, the leadership of our state Epsilon Sigma Phi chapter came to the director and myself, and with this idea of developing a leadership program that crossed program areas to alleviate any concerns or to help prepare agents not only for formal leadership roles, but also program leadership. And that's something hopefully we can get to talk about too a little bit before the webinar is over. Is we have opportunities in both sectors. We have formal leadership roles, administrative roles, and others, but also we have opportunities for program leadership. So some of the goals of the ESP Leads program, we want them participants to understand their personal and professional development, some tools and self-assessments. We're going to take a look at that. We want them to understand their core values. We want them to understand what it's like when you make the jump from programming to administration. And maybe you're comfortable with that, but maybe you won't be comfortable with that. And then we just get into some of the topics of everyday life of administrators, resolving conflict, power and influence, communication skills, and diversity. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to hit on. We've modeled some of this, Rochelle, after what you do in Lead 21 and FSLI and some other things on a much smaller scale, but that's kind of what we're looking at and try to address.
Okay, good deal. DQ, I know you've been involved at the department level and now at the college level. Are there any initiatives that you can share with us that are being incorporated either at in Arkansas or at other institutions that you've been involved with to promote succession planning?
Yeah, well, I'll mention a couple happening here at Arkansas. So first, kind of a larger program is a program called LEADAR. And that program is just a leadership development program that's based primarily in agriculture, looking at understanding the bigger picture from, the governmental side, policy side. An international experience is a part of that as well. And, looking at training some leaders through the LEADAR program. Also, our extension director has a program for it's called Extension Fellows or Administrative Fellows. And so there are only 2 of those slots, but he has 2 administrative fellows who get to see the overall big strategic planning process, go through the budgeting process, and also kind of get an opportunity to work on, special projects in an administrative role. And so these are extension specialists who are given the opportunity to serve in that role. And I think one of the critical parts of that is the fact that those individuals are given some release time from their current responsibilities, from their previous responsibilities to do that leadership development. A lot of times I think it's an add-on versus an opportunity, and it's not as quickly accepted when you have another add-on to everything else that you have on your plate. And so I think when it's valued, or when you say that's an important thing, you allow the individual to have a trade-off between something else they're doing to substitute for that leadership development.
All right. Well, 2 great examples, both from Jeff and DQ. And I'm pretty sure you all will be willing to share if there's someone on the participant webinar here and would want to find out a little bit more. I know in Kentucky, it's still in this fairly new stages, but we're getting to the point now where it's becoming more concrete with some materials. And DQ, I'm pretty sure the same with you. If folks want to follow up with the extension director, they can find out more. So Rochelle, now I know that, and we all know that you're very heavily involved with Lead 21. And so if you can talk to us a little bit about the goals and objectives of Lead 21 and what success rates you've seen with that as far as individuals participating and moving into other roles, whether at their institution or beyond.
Yeah, and can I actually jump back and address the other question too? Because I kind of wear 2 hats, and I'm very aware of the internal stuff that we do here at UGA for extension.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then I'll jump into that. Be happy to address both. I do a lot of employee engagement work here within our UGA extension system, and have been involved in our internal leadership programs. So we have 2. We have one for kind of, well, right now the criteria is that they have to have at least 5 years of experience in extension. And they have to be faculty or some sort of like center director or camp, like a 4-H camp unit director or something like that. So not necessarily staff. So we do that leadership program, and it's called Extension Academy. There's some additional words that go along with it. I just call it Extension Academy. I'm not responsible for it, but I've worked with that program a lot. Sounds a lot like what Jeff was describing that y'all are developing at Kentucky. And then we also have, and that one's really more focused on that personal level about just them learning more about themselves and starting to just decide if they would even be willing or able to move into some leadership roles. And then we have a second one. You have to be an alumni of the first one to participate, but it's called Extend. And that one's really focused more on the organization leadership as far as extension. And they travel around the state, kind of getting to know the different areas of the state, go to the capital, go to Atlanta, kind of experience the politics that come into play with that, especially from a funding perspective. And I don't think there's years of experience. I think you just have to be an alumni of the Extension Academy to participate. And I don't have the numbers because, again, I'm not the primary faculty that leads these programs, but I'm fairly certain that all of our extension leadership team, district directors, kind of that upper administration here at UGA Extension have been through those programs, at least one of those programs. So again, that's kind of part of our succession planning, is kind of building people into those programs. And even some people are now moving into, we're looking at different types of agents, more of like regional agents that are specialized in certain areas. So county coordinators are now over multiple counties. We're kind of playing around with some of that idea rather than just being one county. But they're not over an entire district. And again, a lot of those are people that have been through these internal leadership programs. So I felt like I had to at least say that. I don't know, again, the exact numbers on how many of those people, but I would say a majority of them have been through the leadership program that we have here at UGA. As far as Lead 21 goes, so goals are kind of threefold, since we have three sessions. It's all about the personal leadership at the First Institute and really just understanding themselves through assessments, 360 feedback. And then session 2 is really about understanding yourself on a team, whether that's a team that you're leading or a team that you're on, and recognizing the effectiveness that you bring to the team, whether you're hindering that or helping that. And then session 3 is really focused on kind of that organizational leadership and how to lead and manage change within very complex systems that we work within. And so as far as success rates, I'd like to say that we're pretty successful. And I actually pulled up some of our most recent alumni survey data. So we have almost 1,000 alumni as of class 14, which just graduated. The most recent survey was only through class 13, since class 14 hadn't graduated yet. So we had almost 400 people respond. And just in 2018, we had 130 alumni move into new roles. So I'd say that's pretty great. And then over the 13 years of just, again, the responses that we've gotten, because we haven't gotten 100% responses, but we've been doing the alumni survey for 5 years now. And that we define leadership roles pretty broadly. Some of these could be leading, PI on a grant, or it could be a department head or a dean. But of all the alumni and the roles that they've taken on, it's 7,761 leadership roles that alumni of LEAD 21 have taken on. Some of that's within professional societies, some of that's internal to their organizations. So we're able to track that. Now, again, we know that we can't directly correlate all of that success to LEAD 21, but it's still nice to say that we did part of it. And then again, kind of putting on my UGA hat, we've hired, I don't know how many new department heads and assistant associate deans at the college level in the last 3 years, but 10 of our 26 upper administrators, and I probably could even narrow it down to like 15 upper administrators, because 26, some of those are kind of more of our support unit leaders, like our Office of Communications, OIT, but broadly, all kind of the unit department heads, assistant associate deans, 10 of them have been through LEAD 21. And most of those are more recent graduates and newer hires that didn't come from within UGA. They were external hires of people that went through the program at other institutions and then have moved into UGA. And so I think universities tend to take kind of two approaches. They either ask people to participate in LEAD 21 shortly after they're hired in a new role. So we're obviously not capturing those people that have moved into their role, and specifically like University of Nebraska, they do that. And their succession planning and kind of onboarding for new leaders is pretty impressive from what I know. So people ask people to participate either shortly after they're hired into a new position, or you have the other approach where people participate and then they're hired into new positions shortly after they graduate. Class 14, session 3, we had probably 8 different people stand up and say that they were moving into new leadership positions, and at least 3 of those were associate dean level positions. So they're definitely feeling more confident in their abilities. And I think that's what a lot of our alumni say is, I didn't know if I would want to do this administration thing, and I may not still know, but at least I know that I can do it, or I feel like I would be willing to, again, give up the things that got me into this job that I love to move into something else that maybe I'll love just as much. It's just going to be very different from what I originally got into this business for, if you call it a business, extension or upper higher ed as a whole.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, there's something to be said about leadership programs based on that report. And I know that Jeff has participated in Food Systems Leadership Institute. DQ, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you participated in both LEAD 21 and FSLI.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
So we've got two of our panelists. I'm also currently a participant of FSLI. So you really get a chance to network and learn from other individuals,
right?
And pick the brains of those that have probably gone through the trenches or currently going through the trenches.
Yeah.
And it's just really good to be able to connect with folks that are having those same experiences. So we commend you for hanging in there, continuing to support LEAD 21, and thanks for that report and sharing with us.
Well, and I would be remiss to say that there are other leadership programs out there, because not everybody can do LEAD 21, but there's also like NELD, which is the Northeastern region, WELD, which is the Western region. And those, again, are specifically focused on extension. So there are other opportunities for folks, even if LEAD 21 or FSLI isn't the one for you, because it is expensive, $10,000. And I think FSLI is even more. That's a lot. And your system may not be able to invest in that much. when they've got a large system of people that they're trying to train. So there's other opportunities, whether that's locally in your state, at your university, or within different regions as well. It doesn't have to necessarily be on that national level. And those are really great programs as well.
Yeah. And just looking at the numbers, I mean, it's clear that even though some states may not have a succession plan in place, they're using those leadership programs as part of that tool. So.
Absolutely.
So next question is the challenges. What do you see as the challenging issues in regard to succession planning?
I have a response to that. I know I just talked, but I don't think we're selling the leadership roles in a way that is appealing to people. I just don't think that as leaders, we are telling people the benefits and the value and the things that we love about these jobs. Instead, we communicate some of the things that are a challenge to us just on a personal level about you have to be in so many meetings or you're always dealing with HR issues. We're not telling people the benefits that are the value that these jobs bring us and the joy that they bring us when we're in these types of leadership roles. So that's.
But there are quite a few meetings.
There are, absolutely.
It's interesting. I was actually going to start with something very similar. You always hear that, moving into an administrative role is the dark side.
Right.
And so, in ways it's the light side. You get enlightened by what actually happens to change things in the system. So I think part of it is us as leaders communicating the parts that we do enjoy, like she said, and also being willing to identify that talent early, really looking at, and I say early at all levels, from students all the way through faculty, really looking at how do we identify that individual and how do we convince them that this is something that can be a rewarding career change for them. I think Rochelle hit early on with looking at, we're talking about the fact that this is a big move from your researcher or typical extension role. And, you have to really be able to evaluate if it really fits you and you want to, kind of give up something else to really get involved and be a leader and be an effective leader. So I think that one of the big challenges is trying to give people the opportunity to try it. And I mentioned early on, just also having the ability to give that time off for that individual that you see as a potential leader, and incentivizing it in a way that, they have some release time from their typical role and say, look, I value leadership, and with this release time, you can actually develop a different skill. So.
Great, thank you.
Yep, and just building on that, I think another challenge is just the limited opportunities there are, to advance. Most of our organizations are pretty flat, and openings or opportunities just don't come along that often. And so I'd like to hit also on the importance of our program program area associations and opportunities that they provide for folks to step up and gain leadership skills and abilities, and the roles that they play in our organization are very important. And that just provides another kind of different avenue, but still an avenue where they can grow and contribute.
Awesome.
I'll say another thing. A lot of times we look at the whole development process as something that has to help our individual organization right away. If we're all doing it, I believe in the rising tide philosophy. That individual you're training may leave and go somewhere else, but if everyone's doing it, at the time that you need someone, there'll be someone else in the pipeline. So we need to think broadly about that.
Yeah, and we see that a lot. I'm going to use, I don't want to harp too much on Lead 21, but that is kind of my role on this. We see that a lot. We recently had one person move from Virginia Tech to Clemson, and at the same time, somebody out of his exact same class moved from Clemson to Virginia Tech. Both took department head positions. So, both institutions investing in their people, and while they may not have gotten something out of that specific individual, they still reap the rewards, the benefits of somebody developing their skills and abilities to move into that type of a role.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go to the question and answer box here now, and this is in line with challenges. Sarah had a question. Can you speak to the tension between succession planning and HR policies? And that was one that came up out of the southern region, that a lot of times directors feel as if their hands are tied because of the red tape at the university. So tension between succession planning and HR policies? Anyone?
Well, there's definitely some truth to that. I mean, we have to be open and fair in our search processes, and often that involves, you just pick somebody and put them into place, even though you know that they might be the best person for the job. There is a process, and for legal and other reasons, the process has to be followed.
I think it's a challenge everywhere, and it's HR. They're looking at legal ramifications from everything, and it's part of their job as well. And we have to look at strategies to make it fit. Not to get around it, but to make it all fit. Where if we're identifying that it's the best person for the job, we should be able to have a mechanism for putting that person in the position that they fit best. So it just takes time.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Another question in the box here. It says, when I look around our leadership, there's a lack of diversity in gender, race, and ethnicity. Mm-hmm. How can we encourage succession planning that encourages mentoring, promoting diverse employees who will be our future leaders?
Yeah.
It probably goes back to what Dean Fields mentioned earlier. We have to do a better job of bringing folks along at all levels and folks of all backgrounds. And so having multiple tools in place, whether it's mentoring or leadership programs or other things, helping prepare everyone to take the next step, and helping them know whether the next step is going to be a good fit with them. Those are all important tasks that need to be happening, and it's all in the people development business in my mind. All in developing our employees, helping them personally, professionally, and then those benefits, spill over into the organization.
Oh, go ahead, DQ.
No, I'll let you go, Richard.
Okay. I actually just wanted to say thank you for asking this question, because I think part of the process is just starting to have these conversations and even recognize, when I look around the room, we do not have very much diversity on our team, whether that's gender, race, ethnicity, whatever it is, and to be able to even recognize that and be willing to talk about it. Because I think sometimes we often just avoid that conversation and say, well, there's nobody in the candidate pool that represents this. Well, why not? And maybe it's because our leadership team currently doesn't even look very diverse. So therefore, it's kind of like when student recruitment, it's hard for a Black female or Black male to go into an institution or department where they don't see any faculty that look like them, but that they feel like they can connect with. And the same thing is getting people to move into leadership roles. They may not feel as comfortable moving into leadership teams that they don't feel like there's anybody else that they can really connect with on a personal level or may have similar experiences as them. And so just being willing and able to even have these conversations is a big step towards that. And I think as team leadership can start being more open and honest with themselves about some of those things, that'll then allow them to even figure out, okay, we recognize that. What do we do about it? And it's not easy. These are not easy things to address. And this is actually an area that I'm starting to get more into, developing a second leadership program, more in STEM, traditional STEM, but increasing underrepresented groups of faculty within STEM disciplines as well. And that's part of the conversation, is what does it look like to be a diverse leader in a field that's not very diverse? So.
And I'll say that there's some big things, I think, even systematically, that we have to embrace as colleges of agriculture when it comes to diversifying that leadership group. And that's, from dealing with implicit bias and things like that sometimes frowned upon in terms of really addressing it. And, as I'm, looking at my position, and when I found out that I was considered the first African-American dean at a majority white institution, that's really mind-blowing in 2018. And so I think that we have a long way to go, and we have to be intentional about getting there. And right now, I don't think we are being very intentional. And it's a matter of, if it comes up, we'll try to embrace it, but we're not seeking it out. And so, I think that also being in the position and even attempting to apply for an administrative role as a underrepresented minority, you know, it's almost intimidating. And because you know that up front, you feel like you have to be twice as good and do twice as much for half the credit. And because individuals reviewing you don't look like you and typically don't think like you. And so you have to, I think that until we address some of those issues more directly, we'll continue to have that problem. When the majority of the individuals on the search committee don't look like you or have one philosophy, it's more difficult to break that barrier. So I think that's something we just have to deal with.
Excellent panelists. Good responses. Another question here. Do you see value in succession planning around non-leadership roles?
I'm going to say yes, and that's partially because of some of the approaches that we're now taking here in Extension at UGA. You know, we've got some really great agents who have been in our system for 25 years, and they might be a CEC, but they're, you know, primarily still their agent role. And we are worried about them retiring, but we also know that they have amazing knowledge in their program area and agents from all over their area. Actually, the gentleman that's behind me in this office right here, he's really great at peanut production. He really knows cotton and peanuts, and he's probably pretty close to retirement, and we are trying to find ways to utilize him and move him into new roles, maybe like a regional specialist in a way. So he'll still be agent, but he'll be kind of the go-to on that specific program area. And he'll be able to help us train and develop other agents on that. Now, he's not going to be talking about leadership with those folks. He's really going to be just working with them on their programmatic issues of peanut, cotton, you know, whatever other row crops that we have in this area, because that's what we do in South Georgia. I'm not in Athens. And so we're looking at exploring different types of succession planning in those areas. We don't want to lose our really great experts because they have a lot of institutional knowledge just in that and the relationships they have across the state in those programmatic areas.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Good points. And Ken, this kind of relates to, you know, a conversation we had yesterday about the article that I told you about that's in The Atlantic by an Arthur Brooks. It's called Your Professional Decline is Coming Much Sooner Than You Think. Mm-hmm. And it just has to do with, you know, a comparison of two terms that I hadn't really thought much about before, and that is fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. And the point of this is that up until your 40s and 50s, you know, your creative side, your problem-solving abilities are rising. And then it happens to all of us at about age 50, you know, that kind of starts to decline. And to try to do the same things we've always done in our careers up until that point can really frustrate us. So if we can do like Rochelle said and move folks more over into a teaching, mentoring roles, you know, that can really rejuvenate folks and help them, you know, discover another path in their careers.
Excellent. Okay. All right, another question here, and this kind of ties back to the one around challenges. I know Rochelle mentioned that not selling these leadership roles can cause some problems. DQ mentioned the negative connotation that's presented, and Jeff even talked about the limited opportunities for advancement. The question here is asking, do you believe that the bad press communicated by leaders about their job is due to lack of leaders having adequate training, or a symptom of leaders who don't like their jobs?
Well, administrative jobs are tough, and you know, you face tough problems, and sometimes I guess, you know, we let that leak out more than we should, and maybe, you know, you're right, we don't tell about all the good things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a good point.
I think we're conditioned as humans to discuss the negative more quickly than we do the positive. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as an administrator, a lot of days, the thing that's most on your mind is that negative thing that's happening, and not really always thinking about that thing that's happened that's really the thing you enjoy most. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes when that question is asked, you just left 5 meetings, or you deal with an HR problem, and those things are going to be there all the time. But I think, you know, overall, the majority of the job is a pleasant job, but you do have to deal with some things that other individuals don't have to deal with. And that's part of, that sacrifice that you make.
I think there's another element to all of this too, in recognizing that leadership can be a lonely place, especially if you're an internal person that's moved into that role, because all of a sudden the people that were your friends and your colleagues and peers are no longer those people. So the person that you used to call and talk about whatever it is you talked about on your drive home or on your way to a meeting, or when you had a problem, may not be the person that you can call and talk to anymore, because it's that influence that you have going out. And so if you're calling them and complaining about the things that are going on in your job as a leader, that's going to trickle out into your organization. And some of that is also tied to the training of, sometimes we may not even recognize the influence and power that we have given our role. So sometimes that middle management group can actually have the most influential power, even though they may not have the highest positional power. And so they may be complaining about some of the things, the negativity, giving out that bad press about moving into leadership roles and administrative level, without even realizing that they're influencing that, because they don't see themselves as the leaders at the very top. So again, just some of it's training, but also some of it is just that leadership's a lonely place. And so you have to also be careful about who you're talking to about those things. So I actually told our extension leadership team that last year when we had our retreat, they all came together and was like, y'all have to be the ones that are here for each other, because it can be a lonely place. And there's only 20 of you out of our 900 plus organization, and that's just extension. So.
Fair enough. Okay, Nancy had a comment in regard to the diverse applicant pool as far as leadership is concerned. She mentioned increasing representation and contributions of minority leaders require that we recognize the structural and systemic issues that may be embedded in the organization. Recognizing this will help provide support for emerging leaders. Thank you, Nancy. Well said. And we had one question here, a quick one, Rochelle, about Lead 21. How long is the program? I'm not sure if you mentioned that. And when will the next class be formed? So it sounds like you may be
recruiting.
They submitted that, so maybe
sure. Yeah, really quick. It's about a 12-month experience from the time you start until you graduate. So, and then applications open in mid-September, close November 15th, no matter what day of the week that is. And then the first session is always in June. So you officially start your programmatic experience in March of the next year, but apply by November 15th.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm going to try to keep us on schedule here. I think we're scheduled to 1:30, but we're going to move full speed ahead here. One more question that relates to the challenges, because it continued to come up among the assessment that we did in the Southern region. So succession planning really should be about employee development planning. And Jeff mentioned about professional development plans for individuals. So the whole gambit is making sure that individual is just being equipped. I like to look at it as being able to bloom wherever you're planted. So whatever job you're in, you do that job well and people recognize those skills. But a lot of people don't see succession planning as such. They tend to see it as favoritism towards certain individuals. Mm-hmm. So how do we, as administrators, make sure that we communicate that our succession plan is just that, an employee development plan, and not favoritism towards certain individuals?
Well, it has to be said up front and often. You just have to keep repeating that message. I've heard it said somewhere where you may repeat things and you feel like you said it many times, but some people are just hearing it for the first time. So, and preferably by the leadership of the organization is going to come out when these opportunities open up. But that's a good point, Ken. I've heard people say and think that same thing in the past. Well, they participate in such and such program, they're automatically going to get promoted, or something good's going to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think as with all things, transparency and objectivity have to be at the forefront of that decision-making process. And, you have to look at it and let individuals know what you're looking for in the process of selection and how the process was actually carried out. And I think a lot of times these things do happen in a vacuum, and all of a sudden everyone is alerted that it's happened, and they wonder, so how did this happen? How did this individual get selected? Why wasn't I given the opportunity? And I think you have to be a little more transparent than that. And if someone's selected for that development opportunity. And so, I think that makes a big difference. And it's still not easy, because you are, at that point, when you do the application, you're still making a value judgment. But that's part of what you have to do in deciding who is selected in that process.
The only thing I would add in addition to those points would just be about not just investing in one or two people for certain positions, but kind of broadening your reach and making sure that you're investing in multiple groups of people, and early and often. If you are always investing in the same small group of people, then yeah, it's going to be viewed as favoritism. But if you're opening up the door and opportunities for others to, gain the skills that they need and mentor them and provide them with that access to leadership to better prepare them for those roles, then it's going to be a little more, again, transparent, that you're not just playing favorites to, your favorite two people for a position, or your favorite one person for a position.
Yeah. And I think one other thing to add to what you all have said is that it's important to, communicate that even though you're participating in this leadership initiative, program, project, what have you, there is no guarantee that there will be a position for you.
Yeah.
Because I think when that is the perception, that's when a lot of tension starts to resurface or generate among staff and faculty, when it seems as if someone is being handpicked for something. And sometimes you may have positions that pop up that no one else really knew about, those types of things. So I think it's, as Jeff was saying, communicate often that, hey, we're preparing a pool of people, as Rochelle said and DQ alluded to. And if positions arise, we want to make sure that we're able to have ripe fruit for the picking for those positions.
Can I also just add really quickly,
Yes.
no guarantee, but also no expectation necessarily to move into roles, because I think people, again, they're played the favorite and they're identified as the ideal candidate, but they may not want the job.
That's true.
So just because you go into a leadership program, and I've heard this, people are like, why did they want me to go through this program? Well, they probably see you as moving into some sort of leadership role if you're willing and able.
Mm-hmm.
But the person may get there and decide that they don't want that.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. And I think that's the other part, as a leader, recognizing that, and being able to communicate that to people, that just because we're asking you to do this doesn't mean you have to become the next district director or the next whatever role that you think you may be being groomed for.
Yeah. So. And I think we've seen that a number of times.
Yeah.
Folks.
That's all part of the, our perspective of being people developers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it might not work out, like Rochelle said, but they've discovered that about themselves.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you also, the three of you mentioned in some form or fashion the word mentoring. So talk to us about the role mentoring plays in succession planning.
Well, I think good mentoring is the start of getting beyond that stigma about all of the negatives associated with being in an administrative role. I think that in mentoring is important no matter what we're doing, but especially with administration, because I think most of us who have gotten into an administrative role basically developed a philosophy, not from necessarily a leadership training, but from a mentor. Mm-hmm. And we glean what we have from watching someone else do it and see how they were effective. And, I think that, that is a key component to first getting someone interested and then helping them be successful. And I think that mentoring, a lot of times, we think of it as we have to do it with someone who is on campus, who's right there. But I think that, we have to look at mentors beyond, what we have as resources right on our actual campus. So definitely, I think it's an important part.
Yeah. I think mentor also plays a role in keeping people engaged in the organization. And I'll share just kind of a personal anecdote of that. I would say 6 or 7 years ago, I was in a position where I did not feel valued and mentored, or that anybody really understood what I was doing. And then about 5 years ago, got transitioned into a different unit. And now I want to stay. I mean, when I started this job, I thought I would do it for a couple of years and then I was out of higher ed completely. But I don't feel that way at all. I love what I do. And a big part of that is it's the program and the work that I do, but it's also because I feel like the leadership values the work that I do and they mentor me, and I don't have, I can call somebody and say, I'm struggling with this, or I'm getting asked to do things, and able to try things out and know that I have that mentorship and support behind me along the way. So it's just completely changed my level of engagement with the organization and how much I want to see the organization succeed versus just my individual career path. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. No matter where we are in our professional lives, we all want to be respected, to feel like the work we do contributes to the organization. And if we're not getting that message, then it's going to be natural that we look to other places that's going to give us that fulfillment. And then also to the point of where you find your mentors, some of my mentors are in other states. They're not on campus. And so I think the perspective that you get there is also makes it more rich, and they're able to give you, some different feedback sometimes than what you might get from folks that you work with every day.
Absolutely.
And I think the other thing to add with mentoring is a lot of times we tend to put it on our current bosses to find us a mentor, but that's a part of the individual plan. We really do need to seek out those individuals that can serve as good mentors. And as you move up in administration, the one-on-one may not be enough. You may need a network of mentors. I communicate with a mentor of mine who's not at my current institution, but he mentioned that he has a group of mentors, and they really sort of function as friends, really. And they all tell each other things. And if you leave the pack, you must die. Because they all have shared intimate stories and details about things going on. And, they can trust one another. They built that relationship. And if no one else understands, the 3 or 4 or 5, however many it is, they understand what they're going through and can support one another. So, there are some times, as we mentioned, that administration is a very difficult job. You just got to be able to find those folks that can not only be that listening ear, but they've sort of been in the same trench that you're currently in and can kind of give you some sound advice. So that's definitely an individual thing more so than looking for someone to find someone for you. Okay, so another question here as we get close to the end here. We talked about, or I mentioned the importance of institutional wisdom and how that escapes us on a daily basis, particularly when we see people retiring or leaving to go to another institution, agency, organization. They've been in their current role for a while. What is the most suitable approach to sharing institutional wisdom? Mentoring can definitely be one way, but are there other ways? Some things that kind of come to mind for me would be what's called stretch assignments, where people are given certain tasks to grow beyond what they've been trained to do, or coaching, which is different from mentoring. Just wanting to know what your perspective is as far as sharing institutional wisdom.
So I actually feel like it's not just one person's responsibility in that, and that administrative teams need to be really strong so that they are sharing that institutional knowledge across their team, so that when one individual of that group leaves, it's not like, oh, we have no idea what all that person knew or didn't know. There's got to be a lot of transparency, and that needs to be a pretty high functioning team, so that, again, if not the DQ is leaving because he just took his job, but if he left, the rest of the administrators in his college would be okay, because they also have that knowledge and expertise on various programs, processes, people, all of that. So I think it's not just an individual's knowledge, but making sure that the entire team is a part of that process.
I would also say it's important for the entire team to support each other. It could be that one of your team members, is facing, a pretty big challenge, and having a team where, communication is open and it's, it's accepted, and where you can share in a safe environment, what you're going through, having that support there can make all the difference.
Okay. All right. Okay, we've got 2 questions here. The first one, it says, I appreciate your comments about the challenges for leadership opportunities readily available for women and persons of color in Extension. Our state has little to no transparency for leadership training opportunities. There is no posting of these opportunities. It is like a big secret. What are your opinions about how someone can create opportunities to overcome these barriers and develop leadership skills in such a closed system?
That's a tough one.
Yeah. So I was like,
It would be nice if all organizations were open and transparent, but if it's not, again, the responsibility falls back on us as individuals to help communicate, what our goals might be, to those, who lead us, and then maybe offer a suggestion. Hey, Dean Fields, I'd really like to attend Lead 21. And this is my plan. I could do this, this, and this, and these steps, and come up with, be proactive, come up with a plan for yourself, and put yourself out there.
yeah. Yeah, and I think depending on kind of where you are and what your position is, similar to what Jeff is saying, is not being afraid to have those conversations with your supervisor or your mentors. Because again, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody at your institution. There are other people in your professional societies and your counter institutions and extension systems that may know about these things, or they may know about a specific opportunity. So say they're in the Northeastern region, they would know about the NELD program and say, well, we have this, maybe there's something similar. So therefore you kind of know where to even go to start doing research. But I think it's just a matter of starting those conversations, asking those questions. And if you're not getting answers, then go to the next person in line and don't be afraid to ask the questions, because you have to be your own advocate in that. At least for me in my professional development, I mean, my associate dean asked me, okay, what are you going to do this year for professional development? But I have to be ready to tell her what that is. I can't rely on her to say, okay, you're going to do this, this, and this in your part of your professional development plan. I have to be the one that actively takes the role in identifying what it is that I need and what specifically I think would be the most valuable for me.
I'll just add a little bit. A lot of times that's the case because it's always been done that way in a vacuum. And I think it's important that, you strategically educate individuals about how that looks or how it feels across the organization, for it not to be a transparent process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
Sorry, there was one more question that just popped up. It looks like it's for the panel. They're not getting off that easy, I don't think. But I think it could be answered in just a few words. And the question from an anonymous attendee says, what are the greatest challenges faced by leaders today?
Budgets.
Yeah.
I would say having the right people ready, which is kind of the topic of our whole conversation today.
Yeah. Yep.
I think part of it is also just being able to balance that transactional work that has to be done with the transformational work that has to be done, and recognizing that we've got to invest in the people and the relationships as much as we have to focus on the big decisions that have to be made as far as the day-to-day transactional stuff, because it's really easy to get lost in that and forget about all the relationships that you need to be building and communicating and building, again, that transparency and vulnerability.
Awesome. Great.
I'll go back and just make a real comment, but in agriculture, I think that we are continually struggling to brand ourselves and making sure that people understand who we are and what we do, and actually still having that team that can kind of communicate that message for us is a big deal. And I think Jeff mentioned just having that team of leaders there that can help promote what you need to do.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I know we can't hear you, but we should definitely give our panel a hand clap there, because they've done a very good job today. They didn't give me any pushback when I followed up with them. The first response, they said absolutely, because I sensed that this was a very important topic to the three of them. And I really appreciate each of you for sharing your expertise and your wisdom on this topic. It's definitely one that we need to take more seriously. And the thing that I will wrap up in saying before turning it back over to Gwen is that, you know, I've heard a number of things, but the things that stick out to me is the importance of asking questions and the individual accountability. You know, if we're talking about succession planning and if we're wanting to be a part of that, then we do need to seek out those opportunities for ourselves at times. And if we are in those roles or at the point where we can make some decisions about succession planning, then we definitely need to focus on a paradigm shift and take a more proactive approach. You know, it's not about favoritism. It's not about seeking out one individual for all the opportunities, but it's about building the system. And if we value the land grant mission and extension more specifically, I think we need to make sure that we are equipping the system with those resources, i.e. the individuals, the human capital that we need to make sure that extension is as strong tomorrow as it is today. And even stronger in some situations. You know, as far as accountability is concerned, a lot of questions are being asked about extension on our campuses, because we have a lot of folks that may not necessarily understand it. But we are those that need to kind of take that charge up and make sure that we are rallying the troops, if you will, and moving full speed ahead, as I've said many, many times. So again, thank you, panel, for sharing your thoughts and perceptions with us. We really appreciate it.
All right. Well, I'd like to actually thank you, Ken. Thank you so much for putting together this fabulous panel discussion today. And I think it's really been wonderful. We've been seeing a lot of really positive comments coming in through the Q&A. So we really appreciate your time and, of course, the time of our panelists as well. So, and we also want to thank everyone who joined us today. Thank you all for all of your questions. Thank you for your support throughout our 2019 virtual summer school this week.